There are new questions tonight about the judgment of Attorney General Alberto Gonzales. Congress has just released notes from FBI Director Robert Mueller about a late-night hospital visit that Gonzales made to the hospital bedside of then Attorney General John Ashcroft. Gonzales testified that Ashcroft was lucid when Gonzales tried to get Ashcroft to reauthorize the terror surveillance program, but Mueller visited Ashcroft just moments later that night, and Mueller's notes indicate Ashcroft was feeble, barely articulate, and clearly stressed. Mueller's notes also indicate the dispute between the White House and Justice Department was over a single program. Gonzales testified last month the dispute was over activities, plural. Joining us now with his insight is former federal prosecutor David Shuster. And David, what do you make of this whole episode?
Well, it's another blow to the credibility of Alberto Gonzales, and obviously one of a series. And I think what's critical about this is Director Mueller comes into this with a tremendous amount of credibility. He has a tremendous amount of credibility among lawmakers. I think he has a tremendous amount of credibility with the president. Before this, it was almost viewed as maybe a he said between Attorney General Gonzales and Jim Comey. Now, with the Director Mueller stepping in, I think it's clear that whatever Attorney General Gonzales said about this meeting, if not false, was incorrect.
And it's now not just the notes, of course. There was some testimony from Mueller that sort of hinted that, in fact, it was a dispute about the terror surveillance program, not other activities, as Gonzales said. But given that Mueller does have clearly the ear in the respect of President Bush, and clearly now, at least on 2 occasions, has essentially sold out Gonzales, or at least provided damaging information about him to the press and to Congress, how do you have an administration where you have an FBI director and a Justice Department head who are at odds with each other?
It's difficult. I know Director Mueller has a lot of respect within the Department of Justice as well as in the FBI. I think, honestly, Attorney General Gonzales has lost that respect. I think the Department of Justice is ineffective with him as the Attorney General. I'm not sure whether that's going to change, though.
There are a number of controversies over the Attorney General. I mean, this particular one was where he had said that there was no major dispute over the terror surveillance program, and then this episode was used as, well, this was clearly a dispute if you're visiting some guy's hospital bed right after he's had surgery. There's also a dispute over his testimony over the firing of U.S. attorneys. At first he said he had never seen any documents or attended any meetings. That was contradicted. It feels like it just goes on and on and on.
It does, and that's why I began by saying this is another in a series of blows to his credibility. And I think that with the lack of credibility, he loses any kind of influence he would have on the Hill. I think he loses influence with the line prosecutors within the Department of Justice. They can't really look up to him as a role model.
Now, a couple of Democrats have asked for the appointment of a special counsel to investigate Gonzales for charges of perjury. That's up to the White House to decide whether or not that'll happen, and clearly that's not going to happen. But there's also been this move in Congress to essentially try to find the Bush administration in some sort of contempt for how they've reacted to requests for documents. Take us through that process. Suppose Congress were to find the White House or the White House Chief of Staff or Karl Rove in contempt on the firing of U.S. attorneys for not providing testimony. It then goes to the U.S. Attorney of D.C. to decide, right?
Yes, and the U.S. Attorney of D.C., Jeff Taylor, a very fine U.S. attorney, works for Alberto Gonzales, and there seems to be an inherent conflict, and this has been pointed out, with somebody who's subordinate to Alberto Gonzales trying to hold him in contempt, or trying to hold the administration in contempt for not providing these documents that have been subpoenaed.
So there's really nothing that Congress can do at this point other than release some of these documents in dribs and drabs and try to draw some media attention. There's really nowhere for them to go, right?
That's correct. They seem powerless, and I think that what we found in these subpoena battles where the administration invokes privilege, those battles can go on for months and months. And as we know, there's a limited duration to this administration.
What does all of this do to sort of the line prosecutors? You're a former federal prosecutor. You've sort of worked on the line on these cases. What does it do to all these U.S. attorneys and line prosecutors to have an attorney general who is having such credibility problems?
Well, I think there are 2 things you have to point out. I think a lot of the line prosecutors and even the U.S. attorneys, they've seen attorney generals come and they've seen them go. They continue day in and day out to do the work that they're tasked to do, and they do a good job at it. But at the same time, you do look to the leader. You do look to the attorney general as the moral leader of the department, and I don't think that and I think many line prosecutors are disillusioned by the leadership at this point.
I think even a lot of Republicans in Capitol Hill are disillusioned with the Justice Department to sort of have this sort of problem at the top. And in any case, David Shuster, former federal prosecutor, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
David, my pleasure.